Lawyers of Reddit, at what point, when working for a defendant, did you realize my client is a monster? A lot of years ago I used to work as a solicitor's representative. Cases go to Crown Court, barrister deals, and I am there for paperwork, additional stuff with client etc. 70-something-year-old man had been in jail for 15 years for an assault on a child. Solicitor and barrister working on getting him released due to him getting clean reports from just about everyone. Guards took him out of jail to a dentist, and as he entered the waiting room he saw 2 children and ran straight at them. Guards stopped him. 3 weeks later at court I was the one that sat him down in a room to explain that no, this isn't a hearing to release you. It is so you can be committed to a mental health secure facility for the rest of your life. He didn't take that well. I shed no tears. Well, that's absolutely terrifying. He was obviously ill, but I wonder what was going on in his brain to instantly try and attack them. Ian Albert, a legal assistant. We got a client off of a murder charge. 2 weeks later she was caught with a similar weapon and situation, except this time the guy didn't die. If I've learned anything from watching all the episodes of Snapped, it's that if you're going to kill a second husband and get away with it, you really have to change up your methods. Not a client but my managing partner. The client was a senile 90-year-old man. He wanted to sell land worth a little less than $1 billion to some businessmen. Suffice to say there were men who wanted to take advantage of the situation. One such person, to my dismay, was our managing partner. The partner wanted to insert a provision that would have effectively funneled about 60% of the proceeds solely to him. You could see how his eyes gleamed at the mere mention of money. The provision got lost in the revisions. I was doing the revisions. I'm no longer part of that scummy firm. My general psychology professor worked for the state of Arkansas assessing criminals to see if they would qualify as criminally insane. He told us a story one time about a guy who would get glass shards and hide them underneath his skin, presumably to use at a more opportune time. He said his interview with a guy made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Ivan Millett, serial killer of backpackers in Australia, inspiration for Wolf Creek, was so dependent on inducing pain that when he couldn't hurt others, he turned to self-mutilation. He partially amputated a finger, used a plastic knife to saw through the bone, and put it in an envelope addressed to the High Court of Australia, all while maintaining his innocence. I'm on the other side, but I've got a defendant who went to prison for starving 3 adopted children to the point that they needed weeks of hospitalization, then got out of prison and married a guy with children so that she could start starving them. 2. Listening to her interview where she attempts to justify what she did to both sets of kids disturbed me more than any of the murder cases I've worked on. We had a client try and enforce a post-employment restraint against a 19-year-old receptionist after she quit and started working for a competitor. The reason? He wanted to make her life heck because she wouldn't sleep with him. A creepy 57-year-old man. Him trying to sleep with her was the reason she quit. And surprisingly he didn't take our advice to discontinue his claim, and so we ended up sending him elsewhere. See, this right here shows the one thing many different type of buttholes share. They don't know when to fricking stop. He could have been done for physical harassment and he got away with it. But he had to keep going, not once thinking he'd done something wrong. I listened to a 911 call where the victim's throat was slit while on the call by our client. I will never forget her gurgling and sounding like she was dying. Somehow she ultimately lived through this, saying, "He killed me, he killed me." That is not something I ever wish to hear. She tried to sell her baby. I found out during a hearing, in front of the judge. The people who try to sell babies surprise me. The people who try to buy babies confound me. I had a teacher in high school who was a former lawyer. We always asked him why he gave up his practice to start teaching. He finally caved and explained that his last case was a defense of 3 people. Apparently there had been a 4th. It was 2 couples, who in the act of a drunken, drugged out orgy, decided to kill, partially eat, and dismember one of the women. I guess it seemed like a good idea at the time. As a lawyer, he said it was pretty open and shut, but he had to get his clients the best result possible, and he was exposed to all the horror details, the pictures, and their reasoning. My teacher had such a far off look when he explained that we could see it really got to him. The first and last family law case was assigned to me as a first-year associate. My client broke his wife's jaw and said if they were home in Russia he would have killed her because he could pay his way out of prison there. My mom is a lawyer. This is the story about how she quit being a public defender. When you are a public defender you don't get to choose your cases. She got assigned a young man who, with the help of his friend, had gotten a kitten from a free to a good home ad in the paper. They then brought it home and gave it to their dog as a chew toy. I think they also filmed it. So yeah, she said she needed a shower after every meeting with him. Cancelled her PD contract after the case concluded. I work for an animal rescue charity and those free to a good home situations end badly more often than you like to think. Have heard lots of horror stories, especially with dogs who are given away. When I practiced family law and criminal defense, I trusted and believed my criminal defense clients 100x more than my divorce custody clients. The worst monsters are the people who manipulate minor children for custody reasons. Frick them. Luckily I'm out of that area of law, hopefully for good. Had a divorce client, husband and father, who disowned his autistic son. Tried to argue that he should get all of his wife's retirement having not worked for 12 years. Contacted me during the height of Hurricane Sandy. He was in the Bronx and me in Manhattan, saying he wanted to hold his wife in contempt for not paying him that day while the storm slammed Nick. Told me I was making a huge mistake getting married. My wedding date was November. I could go on. But the worst was when, several months later, since his divorce was taking a long time, he sent death threat letters to myself and my wife saying that he had hired an executor to kill the two of us if his divorce wasn't finalized in 60 days. I called the police and they said he left his premises one day earlier. I heard nothing from him until February 2014 when he emailed me saying he needed a winter coat from his wife and could I help get it for him. Ironically, the divorce didn't have to be completed because he killed himself before the judge signed the judgment of divorce. TLDR. Miserable guy who wanted to spread his misery and crossed the line when he threatened to kill my wife. Thoroughly uncool. I had a client who was accused of domestic violence. Essentially he threw his girlfriend out of a second-story window. Now he's got a terrible history but so do a lot of my clients and his attitude is a little entitled. Also typical. But he also knows the deal and wants a plea deal. So I'm not really prepared when he absolutely refuses the no jail offer from the state. Keep in mind there were like 5 witnesses. Why? Because they wanted him to pay for her medical bills. Okay, and butthole but whatever, not the worst. What did it was his counteroffer. I ain't paying that bitch's bills. Tell them I'll pay for the window. Prosecutor was not happy. A bit shocked to learn that by throwing someone out of a second-story window in front of 5 witnesses, it was possible for him to get off a no jail time. The first week I started at my current criminal defense firm I was tasked with cataloging discovery from our client's phone. The phone had multiple, talking around 4,000, videos, photos, text exchanges with women under 16. Though not all of the girls' ages were confirmed, most, if not all, were under the legal age of consent and many were barely pubescent, naked and being prostituted over 1 year. He would lure these girls in exchange for drugs. Nothing felt totally bizarre until I came across one video where he was clearly forcing himself upon a literal child who was so high on benzodiazepines, not willingly but rather forced, and choking her in the process. When our firm confronted him, he said he was in love with her and that's why he did it. He would also take these girls to hotels and make them frick one another while he taped, but nothing beat what I said above. Pretty horrifying stuff for my first week on the job. Holy crap, that is a messed up human being. When this person, an executive, said she was firing any employee who had a serious illness or injury while promoting fundraisers at a local church for cancer sufferers, no less, in part because employees, thinking she'd be sympathetic, would reveal their confidential health info to her. Criminal defense lawyer. I can name a few instances where I was just absolutely disgusted with my client. Caveat, these are mostly years ago when I was taking just any old case. I most practice white collar and federal now. 1. I won a DUI case because the government messed up on something right before trial was to begin. My client gives me a hug and completely reeks of alcohol. He has driven to court. I took his keys and called his mother. 2. Client who was accused of molesting a 12-year-old. He was mid-40s at the time and I had to shut him down real quick when he tried to tell me how the 12-year-old was coming onto him. 3. I represented a woman for a grand theft charge. Left her in my office to get some things copied before she left. After she left, I realized my sunglasses and car keys were stolen. I tracked her down in the lobby and told her I was not going to represent her anymore and I would call the police if she didn't empty her pockets in front of me and give me my things. 4. I had a client who was released after 25 years in prison for murder and then the same day he beats up his prospective new landlord. He ended up getting another 10 years. He was unrepentant and laughed about how he hit the guy so hard his eyeball popped out. I thought, this guy deserves to be in prison. Took the case to trial anyway and, shocker, lost and he got 10, the max. 5. Client who pretended to be a doctor so he could sell steroids. According to the Gov, he had numerous clients who were made to believe that his steroids would cure their cancer. They paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars and some of them died. I just thought that was pure evil. Defended my client in a lawsuit who defrauded his business partners. Evidence was already overwhelming that my client was liable. Client made matters worse by fabricating evidence and presenting it in court. He got called out on it by his dad's attorney who had the same evidence. It tanked my client's case. My client continued lying to me despite the overwhelming evidence showing he fabricated evidence. He lost big. In addition to a large judgment, he got hit with several felonies for fabricating evidence. Also, the business partners my client screwed over were his dad and brother. My so's mother, L, was abusive. She frequently hit her husband, was a compulsive liar, and just generally made her family miserable. When they were settling the divorce, the judge initially deemed a testimony from the kids, my so and her brother, unnecessary. Probably because they were minors at the time and testifying against one of their parents would be hard on them, to say the least. However, the lawyer representing L was really insistent that they testify. Well, it must have been a shock to the lawyer to suddenly have 2 more witnesses with dozens of accounts of driving under the influence, domestic violence, etc. We figured L must have lied to her lawyer about some significant details because they were completely caught off guard and more than a little angry after the testimony. We like to believe it helped solidify some of the criminal charges placed against her. It was a nice bit of karma after years and years of gaslighting and false rumors that her own lies got her caught. Classic narcissism. Can't admit any wrongdoing under any circumstances. Don't read this unless you have a strong stomach. Attorney's wife here. I used to help him file away evidence and reports. Came across a file with video. Curiosity got the better of me, especially when husband told me not to watch it. File gives this story. Woman was at boyfriend's trailer out in the middle of nowhere. Got pee off at boyfriend, so smacked him in the head with a metal bat and went on her merry way home. Boyfriend is apparently not a pleasant person and nobody really misses him or looks for him. He is fired from work in absentia. On day 7 boyfriend's neighbor finally stops by, hears horse screaming and calls police. That's where the video came from. Day 7, one of the cops was wearing a camera on his uniform. It shows him and his partner going through the house, finding dog shit all over the floor. Boyfriend's 2 Rottweilers, who were also in the house, went without food for about 6 days before they started eating bits and pieces of him. The camera shows the moment the cop found the body on its side, rolled it over, and he's blinking, eyes open, with most of his face gone. The woman didn't even bother to let THR dang dogs out before she left. I do not help file cases anymore. OMG, this should be one of the top comments. Dismembering a body after it's already dead is one thing. Being eaten alive with no one to check on you, that is some crap I never thought of. When I had to go to the US Attorney's office to view the evidence in his case, there they were, the hundreds of images of child pee he had traded, the close-up images of his baby's genitals that he had taken and sent around the internet, the pictures of his neighbor's daughters playing in their kiddie pool. Realized he just could not help himself. But he also never once claimed responsibility or showed remorse, so I don't feel too badly for him. Late to the party but anyways, My first internship in law school was at a matrimonial law firm in a very wealthy area. Think millionaires and billionaires getting divorced. One of the first cases I worked on involved the parents of a victim of a high-profile school shooting. The parents were divorced and had been prior to the death of the child, and were now battling over who would get the victim's compensation fund money and the funds they received from a fundraiser they set up themselves on a GoFundMe type site. These were incredibly wealthy people fighting over what was literal chump change to them and asking the public to donate to them as if they needed it. They were so clearly exploiting the death of their child for money and to pee off the other parent. It was honestly one of the most disturbing things I have encountered, ever. Dude, that is just sad. How can you even consider yourself human when you act like that? Reading this thread makes me respect lawyers so dang much. Not a lawyer, but work for a law firm as an investigator. One of our clients stabbed an ex-lover multiple times over $100. Perp then ran out of the house all bloody. Neighbor and her teenage daughter see him covered in blood and rush inside to see if they can help while they call 911. Victim is still alive. On the 9/11 call the daughter made, you can hear the mom singing Amazing Grace while she tried to stop the bleeding. You can also hear the victim, with a stab wound in her neck, gurgling on blood while she tries to sing along. The EMTs arrived in under 3 minutes, but it took the police 19 minutes from the call to show up to clear the scene for them. She lived for 17 minutes. I saw the photos of the scene with the body still in place. It looked like a scene straight from Dexter. I've never heard of cops needing to do that crap here. EMTs seem to outrank police officers where I live, which to be honest, doesn't surprise me. I've had EMTs visit my house before and they're all absolutely ripped. Oh man, I'm always late when I have a good one. Not a defendant, but a divorce. Client is a late 30s woman. 2 kids, idyllic suburban life with her, incredibly lucrative medical profession, husband. He caught her cheating. He wanted to patch things up. She decided on a divorce. So far, nothing out of the ordinary, unfortunately. Then I start getting the details. He caught her on his birthday, in their bed, while the kids were downstairs. Dude decided to come home early as a surprise, and his wife was getting dicked down by a 19-year-old. But wait, there's more. Really fun stuff from the husband. Guy had been treated for gonorrhea twice, and both times he had caught it from his wife. The second kid wasn't his. It was obvious because the child was 100% some race, and the dad was not that race. Bad stuff, right? Well, enter the texts, emails, etc. She was carrying on like a dozen affairs at any given time, spanning years. She would bring them home and tell the kids they were electricians, plumbers, etc. She'd frick other guys within minutes of dropping her kids off at school. I've met some awful people in my time, but this woman straight up told me how much this guy loved her and how she manipulated the crap out of him. He knew about a lot of the stuff, and each time he found something new he just tried to win her back. I don't want to go into the details of what happened, but some money that you get you don't really want. That's really sad. I hope that dude found happiness. Basically he was watching his neighbor through the window in various stages of undress, got worked up. Minutes later the victim showed up at his shop to purchase some food. She was alone. He closed the door behind her and yeah, well that's it. Prick got 25 years for that. That girl was 7 freaking years old. You have no idea how often in our country the mentality of well if I'm worked up and there is a possibility of release close by, regardless of whom or what age or consenting or not that possibility is or might be, I'm entitled to take it, surfaces. Welcome to South Africa. The adverts on TV showing Table Mountain and the ocean is a load of crap. 47 violent murders every day. 1 in 3 of every woman killed is murdered by her own spouse or partner. Not a lawyer, but was a paralegal for many years. I worked mainly in family law, as I am sure other posters are doing in order to preserve confidentiality. I am going to be vague and also not include genders or locations. I had a client who was getting divorced. The client and soon-to-be ex-spouse had a 12-year-old son with autism. The two of them sat this poor freaking child down at the table one day and made him choose which parent he wanted to live with. Our client called me to gloat that the child had chosen in their favor and to direct that paperwork be prepared. This client was a prominent member of the business community and earned quite a high salary, and was treating this child like a commodity. I was disgusted. I no longer work in law, but this one will always stick with me. One of my close friends is a family lawyer and had a similar situation except in reverse. Both the client and the client's spouse, in front of a judge and in front of their autistic child, took turns arguing why they shouldn't have to have custody. Both of them claiming they are too busy. Their ex is better suited to be a parent. The child clearly prefers the other one more, etc. That poor kid. I saw this play out in court. Plaintiff was a prison guard who was pressured forced to perform cunnilingus with her boss, the warden, on a number of occasions. The warden threatened to have her fired and blackballed if she refused or blew the whistle. After this carried on for a long while, she quit and filed a lawsuit. But unfortunately her idiot lawyer didn't timely file with the correct authorities. At the end of the day, her claim was barred and the warden enjoyed sovereign immunity. At the hearing, you could see the judge asking the prison guard questions to see if there was a workaround or some way for her complaint to survive the pending motion to dismiss. But there wasn't. That was hard to watch. It was even worse when the prison guard began to quietly cry. Fortunately the warden wasn't at the hearing, and the attorney representing the state was professional and just focused on the legal arguments. He dipped out of the hearing in a hurry. Had a client charged with bestiality with his pet goat. Pictures of his undies full of goat hair and his bed littered with goat poo was something the like I have never seen in my career. When after the charges were dismissed, he asked me for help getting the goat back. SMH. Found the Burforth Dumbledore's lawyer. Not a lawyer but friend's dad is. He had a 48-year-old manager from a janky sub shop that was trying to sue his 16-year-old employee for defamation after the 48-year-old took the 16-year-old's phone and was looking at the nudes of his 16-year-old girlfriend and attempting to send them to himself. The kid went and told everybody and the manager found out and tried to sue him. Like, you dumb frick. Why would you go and tell a legal team that you got caught attempting to put child pee on your phone? Frick man. A monster and a fricking idiot. Lifelong criminal defense lawyer here. To be completely honest, it's not about the offense but about the person. I've had people accused of murder that I really kind of liked and thought well of. I've had people accused of shoplifting who have given me the heebie-jeebies and seemed like psychopaths. Speaking from purely a criminal standpoint, having a client who is a monster doesn't matter in terms of your duty to them, but it does make the job less pleasant. My worst clients have been people who are comfortable scamming others of their money. Not a lawyer but a client of one I overheard a case of. This woman wanting her US citizenship married an older man who was never hands-on. Basically when the man went to file taxes he had someone do it for him. She made a deal with this person. They transferred his entire estate and accounts to her, but her citizenship hadn't been fully established as this was roughly a week into the false marriage. All of the older gentleman's money and assets were frozen because a foreign citizen owned them. The case is still stuck in legal heck and I don't know what happened later. Murder, robbery, and most crimes involve regular people who did or may have done something stupid due to alcohol or situations. But the client you keep an eye out are the ones charged with fraud and the like. Liars, cheats and all around shady people generally speaking. Even the gangs operate on a code of conduct. An old-fashioned warlike code of conduct. Honor and courage are important to them even though they commit crimes. 22 years threatened twice, so not that bad. The real danger? Not in criminal law. It's family law. That's where people get really heated. It's personal. Prosecutor here. Most of us in this profession have the utmost respect for those on the other side of the aisle. Most people really don't know or understand the really fricked up crap that we have to witness and deal with on a daily basis. There's a reason attorneys have the highest percentage of alcoholics by profession. I'm a civil litigator. I've never thought my client is a monster, but there are a few I've thought were idiots or liars or both. Two of my favorites are a client who instructed me, against my advice, to object to the temporary judge even though we had just discussed it and I had just told the fricking judge we were okay with him, and a client who testified pretty much the exact opposite of what she had told me in our initial meetings and what we had repeatedly discussed. You can't send me to the principal's office. You're a substitute teacher. civil defense here, so maybe not as juicy as the crim defense folks. Some of the work I do is employment defense, particularly physical age harassment discrimination cases. I'm pretty cynical and see a lot of cases where plaintiffs are full of crap, particularly in harassment discrimination cases. In one case I was defending a company and that company's manager. Jointly, the manager seemed like a straight up guy and I pride myself in being a good judge of character. I was pretty convinced the case was just payback from a disgruntled employee. To my credit, the plaintiff, a 38-year-old female, was a really poor employee by all accounts. Still, it didn't prepare me from what I found doing a review of every email the company had stored on their servers. Not only did this guy stick his hand down this woman's shirt without consent, when she threatened to go to HR he said he'd get her fired and make sure she never got a job again. The lady was a single mother with 3 kids. He also propositioned her for physical intimacy in exchange for a day off. He thought the email had been wiped because the company had a 1-year retention policy. Apparently, some of the company's older emails remained on a server before the policy was put in place because of the migration of the emails from an older outsourced IT company. Not sure if my terminology is right here. I had to substitute out of the case thereafter for conflict reasons since my 2 clients' interests were no longer aligned. Geez, pure luck for that woman. Not a lawyer, but I worked in a federal prison. Several inmates come to mind, but the one I'll tell about is a former Catholic priest. He'd given up his vocation years before, but he got caught up in a child pee sting. At that time sentencing was based on how many images a suspect had. He had thousands and was facing a maximum of 40 years. The guy was in his 50s, so that would have been essentially a genuine life sentence, since federal inmates can only earn 15% good time. At his sentencing hearing, and I read this transcript so I know this as a fact, he told the judge when he was a priest he'd physically abused hundreds of young boys. Despite treatment and his own remorse, he felt completely incapable of stopping his obsession with child pee and with child abuse. He had not ever been even charged with these crimes, but he felt guilty enough to admit them and then ask the judge to impose the full penalty so he'd be locked up for the rest of his life. A former teacher told the story of an instance where he was assigned by the court to defend a woman accused of child abuse. When he saw the cigarette burns all over the kid's arms, he knew she was clearly guilty, but he still had to defend her. He said he's never been so relieved to hear a client found guilty. I had a professor in college who was a defense lawyer prior to being a professor. He told us the reason why he decided to stop defending people. He had a client who was accused of violating a teenage girl. From what I remember from his story, there was no DNA evidence to point to the client. The client was adamant to my professor that he was completely innocent. My professor argued in court at the trial and was successful in defending his client and got him acquitted. After everything was all said and done, he and his client went out to dinner to celebrate the victory. My professor said they were talking about some random topic when the man picked up his drink, said, "You know." He then took a sip and said, "I think she liked it." My professor recalled that the smirk on the guy's face made him want to vomit. This is most unsettling. About 2 months ago, one of my clients picked up a statute book off the defense table and knocked me over the head with it during a probation violation hearing. That wasn't a great day at work. Law and Order SVU writers are salivating. Just got enough content for an additional 30 seasons. When I saw the state's discovery file, the video of the SWAT teams entering the residence, blood on the wall, wife's arm cut so deeply you could see all the insides, photos of the bloody blade in the street, then reading their infant had been in her arms when it happened. Yikes. Not a lawyer, but my daddy's. He has told me the story of why he stopped being a criminal defense lawyer. He got a case with a couple young Russian guys who were charged with securities fraud. My dad worked super hard on the case and got the guys a great deal with some probation, of fine, and some community service. That night the guys treated my dad to dinner, and on the TV in the bar was a news story about insurance fraud, and one of the guys said, "Hey guys, security fraud is old news, let's try that next," and pointed at the TV. That night my dad came home to my mom and said I can't do criminal defense anymore because he realized the people he was defending were truly bad people. Sometimes it takes something this small to break someone, compared to the others here. Very unfortunate overall. In my hometown, a guy drove to the tallest bridge in the middle of the night and threw his 4 kids off of it. He confessed, saying it was all out of revenge to his wife. He's on death row now. Yup, I hope this hasn't happened more than once, but I helped look for 4 kids a guy threw off a bridge. One baby was found 2 states over, having floated through the Gulf of Mexico. When he told me that both of his biological teenage daughters were lying about him violating them because he refused to let them go to prom, so they were mad at him. I could have got my client off on a technicality. He was already serving 10 years for armed robbery when another case came up of gang debauchery. I went to check the case file and saw that they had made a muck of gathering evidence and blood samples. The detective said he was just going to archives and pointedly left the file out. I read the woman's account of her 14 known assailants from her home village, including my client. I dropped the case then and there. He died in a gang initiation in prison shortly afterwards, but he was apparently one of the kingpins. Sometimes you have to know when to fold them. Being a lawyer is one of the few examples I can think of where fricking up your job can be a good thing. My mom is one, and she told me a story. She was defending a man that was accused of killing his whole family with an axe and burned their bodies. Yeah, he had 3 children, ages 3, 4 and 7, and a wife. My mom said she was afraid to talk to him because he just did not seem normal at all. She said that he was very freaky and that he would just stare at her for no reason for a long time. It still haunts her to this day. He got the death penalty and she was very happy. She didn't even care about the money. You have been visited by the ingenious Joe. Comment brain so you always see the glass half full. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.